And now we're really starting to hit the guts of this course because Chapter 7 is motivational concepts. And if organizational behavior is about one thing, it's about motivation. Motivation is the process that accounts for a person's intensity, direction, and persistence aiming towards an organizational goal. Now, persistence, of course, is how long the effort is maintained, and direction is the manner in which the effort is focused or directed. And we're going to discuss a whole bunch of theories of motivation in this chapter. Now, the truth is, it's not like this is one of those things where some people say one thing is true and the other people say the other thing is true. They could all be true. All of these things are things to think about. The more a person understands about motivation in terms of these different theories, it's not like you have one theory that you have to stick to. It's that the more you know about these, the better you can be in terms of a manager, because you can take all of these things into account. Whereas if you focus on only one of these theories, you're probably going to leave out something that's important. And we've got these different theories that we're going to discuss. We've got 4 different theories that we're going to look at: Maslow's, McGregor's, Hertzberg's, McClelland's theory of needs, and then we're going to finish it up with the chapter with some applications towards organizational behavior, management, things like that. Okay. First, we've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's was the idea in terms of that people's needs go from what is essential at the lowest level, that's the broadest base, that's what everybody needs. And then once you're able to establish the things that you need on the lower level, you're able to work your way up the spectrum. You need certain things, and then as you move along and you get those things, you strive for higher and higher things. Physiological is the lowest level. Physiological means your body, your health. You need your systems to work properly, you need your health. You need to be safe. That's on a little bit of a higher level. You can only worry about safety if your body's intact. Once your body's intact and you have your physiological needs, you're not hungry, you're not overtaxed, then you can worry about safety. A person, once they have safety, they're able to worry about social camaraderie, friendship, relationships, things like that. After that, they can work on esteem, which is self-confidence and good feeling about oneself. And then finally, self-actualization, which means the fulfilling whatever your personal goals are. In other words, whatever you want to be, trying to pursue whatever goal or idea or achievement that is. That's this very broad idea of self-actualization. Now, it doesn't mean that none of these things can, while you're trying to increase your self-esteem, you can't have any safety problems. But in terms of how we think of our priorities, our first priority is physiological, making sure we're intact physically. Then we got safety, our building up our social circles and social happiness, and then we can work on ourselves towards our own self-esteem and self-actualization. Theory X and Theory Y, which is of McGregor, is really kind of the point-counterpoint. It's a separate theory from Maslow. These are all separate theories from each other, but again, it doesn't mean that one is correct and one is incorrect. They could all be correct, theoretically. And McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y is based on the idea that we've got positive motivation and we've got negative motivation. The negative motivation is the quote-unquote Theory X, and the positive motivation is the quote-unquote Theory Y. The Theory X is that inherent dislike. People have an inherent dislike for work and will try to avoid it, and therefore they have to be coerced or threatened with punishment in order to work properly. Theory Y is that they view work as being as natural as rest or play. In other words, people's norm is to want to work, and therefore they exercise self-direction and self-control if they're committed to whatever objectives there are. It's not that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. It's that both of them are kind of these competing ideas, in the human psyche and in the human behavioral course. Now we get to the second half of our 4 basic theories, and that is Hertzberg's 2-factor theory. And that is, the 2 factors are motivation and hygiene. Now, hygiene is what we refer to when we talk about cleanliness and body hygiene. Here it means something a little bit broader. And we also have motivation on the right, and these are just 2 different things that drive our decisions and drive our motivation. Hygiene, which again is based on the idea of really overall personal well-being of the employee, of the person being supervised, not necessarily just making sure to wash your hands and then take showers and whatnot. These depend on things like quality of supervision, pay, company policies, working conditions, relationship, job securities. And then on the other side, we've got things that relate more to psychological motivation. The left is the physical needs of the employees being taken care of. And on the right, we've got the motivational opportunities, psychological opportunities for a person, opportunities for growth, recognition, responsibility, achievement. Taking care of each of these in terms of the employee is going to really be necessary to have an effective working environment. The employee has to feel that the environment is safe and the environment is secure and the environment is pleasant. And the employee also has to feel that there's proper recognition, proper opportunity for achievement, etc. And finally, the last of our quartet of early motivational theories is McClelland's theory of needs. And there are essentially three needs over here. Of achievement. Everybody, when they work in an organization or by themselves, they want to achieve something. Otherwise, it's one thing just to come home with a paycheck, but then if you haven't actually done anything at work, eventually you're not going to feel very good about your job. That's the drive to excel. The need for power, which is the need to make others behave in a way that you want them to, that they wouldn't behave otherwise, and a need for affiliation, which is a desire for close relationships with other people. These things are not equal in all people. Some people have more of a need for affiliation, and some people have more of a need for power. Some people have more of a need for an achievement. But these are some of the things that drive the attitude of people in the workplace. High achievers, this is still McClelland over here, prefer jobs. And when I say this is the one on top over here, the need for achievement. They need personal responsibility. It's one thing, again, you have somebody on your staff in terms of organizational behavior who appreciates achievement, who really wants to excel. Well, they need personal responsibility. They can't be told what to do at every turn. Feedback and some degree of risk. Obviously, too high a risk is going to cause people to be uncomfortable and scared as they work, but too low a degree of risk almost breeds complacency. And people who are achievers, they don't want complacency. They want to be able to, do what they can to achieve that higher level. High achievers are not even necessarily good managers. On the contrary, sometimes managers are people who can, make the way for the achiever to work and establish the good environment for the achiever to work, where the achiever might just want to work and might not want necessarily to delegate. It's one thing that achievers very often have trouble doing. They want to do everything themselves because they have a way it ought to be done, and they don't really want to delegate. They don't want to give the power, give the authority, and give the power and give the job to other people in the organization when they really may need to in order to be effective. So next we move to contemporary theories. We looked at historical theories, traditional theories of motivation, and now we are going to look at some more modern, hyper-modern theories of motivation and management. First, we've got self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is the idea that people have control over their actions. So when they think they're being forced, people like to have control over their actions, so when they think they're being forced to do something, they're not going to be as motivated. The idea is that here, if you want to be an effective manager, sometimes the best strategy is to try to give the employees the illusion, at least, that they're in control. And the more they think they're in control, or the more you can leave to them. You can't leave everything to the employees. You have to make some decisions for them. But the more that you can leave to them, the more motivated they'll be. Even this cognitive evaluation theory is based on the idea that external rewards, namely a paycheck, which everybody needs, they need to survive, but that can actually decrease motivation in the long term. If somebody's working for something that they were previously doing for fun or because they felt a sense of accomplishment, and now they're doing it as part of a company, that could actually in some sense decrease motivation. Now, of course, there's also the fact that people have this additional motivation that they need to make a living, but that's the idea. It kind of spars with this idea of self-determination, because people want to be as self-determinative as possible. And now if they have to do something because otherwise they're not going to get their paycheck, that saps a little bit of the self-determination out of it. Self-concordance considers how strongly people's reasons for pursuing goals are consistent with their interests and core values, which is the idea, okay, you have a job, you do it for a paycheck certainly, but how well does that correspond to what you believe anyway? Is this the sort of thing that you would want to do anyway? Self-determination is really all looking at, okay, how does this impact somebody's self-identity and self-worth? So now we've got goal-setting theory, and goal-setting theory is based on the idea that people respond well if they have certain specific measurable objectives. It's the one thing in education they talk about measuring objectives and assessing objectives, and that's really necessary because without that, the work is kind of chaotic. Good, solid way of organizing a task is by setting specific goals. Goals have to be have to be specific. They can't be just make it a better company. They have to say get $100,000 worth of sales in the first quarter of 2017 or something like that. Difficult they have to be. They have to be accepted by the employees, but they can't be something that's not challenging. They have to be challenging. They have to be accompanied by feedback. Supervisors have to be able to explain why those goals are being met or not being met, or how they can have a better chance to be met. But there are also things that have to be taken into account when you're talking about goal setting. Public goals are obviously more motivational than goals that are only good for a few individuals. Task characteristics, tasks that are simple and that are familiar to the people given them, are going to be better and it's going to be easier for them to complete them. And national culture, of course, also helps helps in establishing goals. It says over here, Western culture suits best. Western culture is more about achieving individual achievement rather than maybe certain other cultures in the world put more of an emphasis on teamwork and working as a team. And finally, management by objectives, which, as you'll see, is not really a contradiction between the previous two theories. In fact, it almost kind of builds on the previous one that we just looked at, is the idea of management by objectives. And what this does is that if you're a manager, if you're a project leader on something, the best strategy to do is to break it down into a whole bunch of little pieces and make each one of them a mini objective. We want to increase sales by $100,000. So what do we have to do? Maybe we have to increase marketing to hit more people, and then we have to improve our customer service to get repeat customers, and then maybe we have to improve the ability to sell on cold calls, whatever. And each little goal that we put in, managing them one at a time might be the most effective way to do it. The goals should be specific. There should be a time period. You can't just say we should do it eventually. We should do it by January 1st. Performance feedback to the individuals who are doing it, and of course, allowing the employees' participation in the decision making will help increase their motivation. If you look at this, is just kind of a visual representation of the objectives. You might have a big objective over here, but then within the big objective of increasing sales for the entire company or growing for the entire company, then there could be sub-goals that are divided up among different divisions in the company: industrial division, consumer products division, and then within each subdivision there are further subdivisions, in production, in sales, in customer service, research, development. And then within those, there are individual objectives. So increasing sales in a company might be to produce 1,100 cars in a month instead of 1,000 cars in a month. That would be a production goal. To convert 5% of our leads instead of 3% of our leads, that's a sales goal. To decrease customer complaints by 10%, that's a customer service goal, etc. So establishing goals that are subdivided and elegantly put among various other goals among the various other goals in the organization. Okay, and now we're going to continue looking at theories. This chapter is all about theories of motivation. Again, these are all based on the idea that they could all be synonymous with each other. Not synonymous, but they could all be coexistent with each other. They could all be building on each other, and knowing all of them will help the manager be a more effective overall manager. And first we've got self-efficacy, another one of these theories, which is that an individual's belief that he or she is capable of performing a task. This is otherwise sometimes known as self-confidence. And self-confidence is half the battle when it comes to effectiveness. If you believe you can do it, it's very possible you can. If you start off with the belief that you can't do it, you probably won't be able to. How can this be increased? Well, gaining experience. People who have experience in something think that they can do it from their own experience. Vicarious modeling, which means learning by watching somebody else do the task, and that will allow you to see how it's done and therefore be able to envision yourself being able to do it. Verbal persuasion. That's, motivational speakers. You can do it. You can do it. I think I can. I think I can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. These are all things that increase self-efficacy. And arousal means to get energized to do something. And if people are psyched up to do something, then they think they can do it, or at least they have a more positive image when they're moving into this area. And this is just kind of a cyclical positive feedback loop in terms of self-efficacy. If you have confidence, then you're going to have a higher level of job performance. If you get tasks that are challenging, you're going to feel better about your accomplishments, etc., and these things all combine to improve self-efficacy. Equity theory is based on the almost commonsensical idea that what you put into something, you'll take out of something. Employees weigh what they put into a job situation against what they come out of it. If they think that they're not making enough money considering how much they work, then they're going to be dissatisfied. On the other hand, if they think that their efforts have been well rewarded, their inputs have been matched by their outputs in terms of not just money, but also in terms of promotion, in terms of recognition, in terms of responsibility, in terms of whatever other positive carrots you can give to an employee. They compare their input to output ratio. Basically, this thing up here is that if your input is less, if the output is less than your input, in other words, you're putting in more than you receive, well, then you think that you're being under-rewarded. If you think that you're being over-rewarded, if you think you're getting a high salary and you're not doing anything and nobody's ever bothering you about it and people are praising you even though you don't do anything, well, it might be a good job. You might be happy to have it, but overall, it's not really the sort of way to improve motivation to excel. And equity, there are basically 6 possible reactions to people that think that they're not being treated fairly. Again, it doesn't mean necessarily being treated unfairly by the supervisor. It could just be whatever the outputs are based on whatever other factors there are in the industry. You could change your inputs. In other words, you could change how much work you put in. You could put in less work. You could try to change your outcomes. Try to improve whatever performance you establish, or try to get a salary raise, really. Distort perceptions of self. Maybe you change your own view of your own self-worth to meet what outputs you're getting, or what effectiveness you're having, or what you're getting paid. Distort perception of others. You might think that that people in the field are not getting the appropriate outcomes. Choose a different referent or leave the field. Referent meaning your frame of reference, how you look at things. Or you could leave the field. I mean, these are really just different types of reactions to people who perceive an inequity between their inputs and their outputs. Organizational justice is based on the idea that people have to think the process is fair. The model of organizational justice is the idea that things will be fundamentally fair on a level of an organization. These are a whole bunch of different elements over here. There's distributive justice, which in essence means that you get what you deserve, or hopefully. These are all things that may not necessarily exist, but these are the expectations of somebody in a workplace. And if somebody perceives injustice, their morale is going to be low, and in general, it's not going to be good for the environment. There's procedural justice. If before a person is punished or a person is accused of something, there should be some level of opportunity to explain, investigation, etc. Informational justice, which is the degree to which people are kept informed of what's going on by the supervisors. And interpersonal justice is the way in which people just are nice and fair to each other around the office. And finally, we've got the expectancy theory. The expectancy theory is the reasonable expectation of people in an organization, behaving in an organization, functioning in an organization. And the three key relationships here are the effort performance, which is the idea that a effort will lead to performance. The good effort will lead to good performance. There's performance reward, the idea that if I produce properly for the organization will reward me properly, both in terms of pay and in terms of recognition, responsibility, promotions, things like that. And of course, reward personal goals, which is the relationship between, okay, does the fact that the person is going to get more money or the fact that the person is going to get a promotion, is that the sort of thing that motivates that individual? And they all lead to each other. The person has to think, the employee, the person working for the organization has to think that effort will lead to performance, performance will lead to rewards, and rewards will lead to whatever my goals are. If my goal is to make more money, well, if I put in more effort, I'll produce more. If I produce more, they'll give me rewards, which means more money, which was my personal goal. If there's a breakdown, if I think that my effort's not going to lead to more performance because the organization is broken, or I think that my performance is not going to be recognized by the organization, or I think that the rewards that the organization gives me won't matter to me and won't apply towards my personal goals, they'll give me a promotion which I have no interest in, or they'll give me a raise but I'm looking more for, recognition, then any breakdown will lead to decrease in motivation. All three of these linkages really have to be there for optimal motivational environment. Then we have job engagement, kind of the crowning, the icing on the cake for this chapter, is the investment of an employee's physical, cognitive, which means in thinking perspective, and emotional energies onto a job performance. Job engagement is the effort, the overall effort that the employee puts into making the organization do better. Organizations where employees that have highly engaged employees have higher levels of productivity, fewer safety problems, lower turnover, because people feel that they're engaged and therefore they're more highly motivated. They see themselves as being a bigger part of the organization, etc. All the things in this chapter, all the theories in this chapter, have many different specific applications for managers, and let's look at some of them. Make sure extrinsic rewards are not viewed as coercive. In other words, you're not just forcing people to work otherwise on the pain of them losing their salary or losing their status. Rather, motivation should also be from a positive level. Within reason, there should be clear goals, and the goals should be challenging. Difficult is an interesting word over here. I personally would probably rather use challenging than difficult, but the employees have to feel that they're not just doing things that are rote and that are easy. They have to feel challenged. Effort makes you help employees feel successful in completing tasks that will increase motivation. In other words, if you make them feel successful, then you increase their self-confidence. Increasing their self-confidence increases their engagement. Increasing their engagement increases the overall effectiveness of the organization. Employees need to feel fairly treated, of course, and that we discussed in terms of expectancy theory. And employees are more motivated to engage in behaviors that they think they can perform and that lead to valued rewards. Thinking they can perform is the self-efficacy idea, and leading to valued rewards is the expectancy idea, where employees think that the effort that they put in will ultimately come around to give them what they want in terms of their personal goals. It will, their effort will lead to better performance, their performance will lead to rewards, and the rewards that they get will lead to whatever their personal goals are. So make goals specific, difficult or challenging, increasing self-efficacy, and sharing information and decision-making can help increase employee engagement.